Hey everybody, I hope you're all well. In the light of what's happening in the world at the moment with coronavirus, and wherever you are in the world, I'm sure you're going through the same issues that we are here in the UK, where you've all been asked to self-isolate. Um, Now, I didn't know I was going to cover this topic until I woke up this morning, actually. What it's all about is, well, it's a strategy that I call the inner critic rehabilitation. Now, I didn't think I was going to be doing this today until I woke up this morning. Now, I'd been having a dream. I forget what the dream was about, but then I woke up, and within that little moment in time between your thoughts coming together and you're recalling the dream, there's a couple of second gap, and then all your conscious thoughts crowd into your brain, and then the inner voice gets going, and all the thoughts, all the anxieties, all the issues of yesterday crowd in, and the conveyor belt of thoughts start up all over again from yesterday. And this happened to me this morning, and it's something you're probably all familiar with if you think about it. If you think back to when you woke up this morning and you had maybe a couple of moments of calm, and then all of yesterday's thoughts crowded in, and it started all over again. All the anxieties that you're currently going through, they all crowded in, and that couple of moments of peace was gone, and it all started again. And many people think that there's nothing you can do about this inner voice and all these thoughts of anxiety. And I've seen it so many times. People have asked in forums, how do I deal with this? How do I cope with it? And so often I see the responses, no, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it. You've just got to learn to live with it, or make peace with it. But the general consensus is that there's nothing to be done. That you have to live with it. Nothing you can do about it, and that's it. And it's at this point I put my head in my hands and shake my head, because there absolutely is something you can do about it. Your inner voice, it can be trained like a muscle. And so that's what I'm going to cover in this little live stream. It's a technique that I put into a program I created called the Mental Health Master Plan. It's not something I've talked about in this group before, but I call it the inner critic rehabilitation. But it's heavily influenced by another guy called Eckhart Tolle. You may have heard of him before. He's written a number of books, and it's based on a strategy that I read in one of his books. And the way he describes it is that what you do is you place your attention inside your own head. Say you float up, like imagine the inside of your head is the room that you're in at the moment, and you can float up. You can float your attention up, and you can be a fly on the wall of your own mind, and you can look down on your mind. And as a thought comes into the mind, as an anxiety thought comes in, you can in some way annihilate that thought or neutralize it, however you want to phrase that. And the way Eckhart Tolle describes it is he imagines the thoughts he doesn't want to have as like mice coming through a mouse hole in the wall. And when one comes through the wall, then he's there waiting, and he pops it on the head and knocks it out. Now, I might have not have described this accurately. It's many, many years ago since I read his book, but that's generally how it works for him, how he described it. And in the Mental Health Master Plan, I take this strategy much, much further, because, of course, everybody is unique, and you can imagine this scenario any way you like. Now, I don't know how much thought you've ever given it, but the type of anxiety thoughts that you have are sometimes not voiced in your own voice. I mean, you've got an inner voice there. But if you really think about it, it might not be your own voice. If you've grown up with a really authoritarian parent who was very strict with you, or some other person who was always putting you down, or telling you what to do, or in some way being very controlling over you, or really putting you down in a way that really squashed your self-esteem. And as we grow up into adults, our inner voice takes on the tone and the sound of that person of authority in our childhood. And maybe that's the case for you. Maybe your inner voice doesn't sound like that person, but the turn of phrase that your inner voice uses could well be the turns of phrase that person, that authoritative person in your childhood used, in the way that they commanded you, or ordered you, or put you down in some way. They told you, you're not good at this, don't do this, or however it transpired for you in your childhood. Your inner voice may now be modelled on that person, and it's a completely unconscious process. In other words, it's just happening automatically, and you're very seldom ever thinking about it. It's just there, and you think there's nothing you can do about it because it is you. But the truth is, it's not you. It's a separate entity. It's just become so intertwined with your personality that you believe that you and your inner voice is one. And if you're one entity, then how could you possibly do anything about it? And this is why people say, well, no, you've just got to live with it. There's nothing that can be done with it. And I understand why people say that, because, well, they might have, like me, they might have lived with it for many, many years, many decades, or their entire life. And they may have tried different ways to try and neutralize this inner critic, and failed. And at some point, you give in, and you accept, and you live with it. And then you go and pass that advice on to other people who are maybe younger and looking for a solution to this. And then they take on your failure, and they start believing you. And then they give up the fight as well. And so the issue perpetuates. But the truth is, you can do something about this. Now, it's not easy. And people are often looking for instant solutions, but it's not an instant solution. It's like breaking a habit and forming a new habit. And in reality, I mean, people say, well, it takes 30 days to form a new habit. But that's not really correct. I mean, it might take 30 days to begin forming a new habit, but to actually and completely form a new habit, it can take you somewhere between 18 and 24 months to complete that cycle. And throughout that entire time, you have to be mentally performing interventions, I think, is the best way to describe it, because your old habits, your old thoughts are an unconscious process. And in order to break that process, you've got to inject conscious thoughts. And how often are we in a situation, an anxious situation, and we remember to consciously override the automatic process of thoughts that we're going through? It seldom happens. I mean, what you need to do in order, but when you actually get to that scenario, of course, that instruction that you read about, which sounded so good and so logical, where is that when you need it? It's a conscious thought, and it's locked away somewhere in the back of your head, and you're on complete autopilot. Let's say you're in a scenario where you're in a social situation and you're talking to people, and somebody has advised you that this is what you need to do. You need to straighten up your posture. You need to breathe deeply, and you need to talk from your diaphragm to get a richer volume of sound. And you need to look people in the eyes for 70% of the time, etc. And you need to do this, that, or the other. And it's all great advice, and it all works if you remember to do it. And that's the whole problem. You never remember to do it, at least in the beginning. This is why it takes somewhere between 18 and 24 months to actually override an automatic process, a habit, if you like. 30 days is a great start. Let me give you an example. I used to be a smoker a long time ago, and it actually took me almost 2 years to actually quit. And it was a mental interjection into my unconscious thoughts, constantly reminding myself not to do this. I went to an NHS mobile van one day, 4 days into the process of quitting, and I said to them, look, I'm trying to quit. What advice have you got for me, and how can you help? And they said, how long have you been quit for? And I said, 4 days now. And they says, oh, you're fine. You've quit. You're fine. Nothing to worry about. So you've done it. And of course, it's 4 days is nothing. What they were referring to was the fact that the nicotine may not be in your bloodstream any longer, but the thoughts, the persona, the personality, the smoking persona was still well and truly in the head, and it was verbalizing it through the inner voice. And that takes a long time to get rid of, to override. Now, the thing is that you have to, in the beginning, you'll forget very often the strategy that I'm going to show you. But it's a process, it's a slow process of reminding yourself and thinking about it all the time. And you're thinking, next time I'm in that scenario where I need to use this strategy, I'm going to remember it. And maybe you get to that next time and you forget about it. Then the third time, and then the fourth time, maybe you remember it and you put it into action. So maybe in the beginning, maybe only 1 in 20 times you'll consciously remember to put the strategy into motion and use it. But let's say a couple of months down the line, maybe you're remembering 2 times out of 20 to use it. In a year from now, you might be remembering 15 times out of 20 to use it. 2 years from now, you're just going to be doing it on autopilot. You will have crossed the bridge. You will have transitioned. But you really need to want this. You need to want it badly, because it's easy to give up, and in the beginning you don't see any results. And you think, well, it doesn't work. I'm going to give up. And that's the truth, unfortunately, for 99% of people. Well, let's be generous and say 95% of people. They don't see the results quickly enough, so they give up. But if you're one of the 5% who's going to keep going regardless of not seeing results, and you keep it up for long enough, for maybe minimum of 12 months, let's say 18 months, you're going to see results. You're going to see that the transition is going to happen, and it's going to be gradual, so you're not going to notice it so much yourself. But let's say somebody who sees you today, and then they don't see you again for the next 18 months, they are going to notice the difference. Not so much yourself, because it's so gradual within yourself that you don't see the transition. But we're talking specifically today about rehabilitating that inner critic. And I've discussed how Eckhart Tolle imagines it inside his own head. So however your inner voice takes on form for you, or you've probably never even thought about trying to give it a form, But try it now. Have a think about your inner voice and those inner critical thoughts that you have. Do they sound like somebody from your childhood? Somebody that's putting you down, maybe? Or telling you that you can't do something? What are those thoughts? How are they phrased? Is it somebody else's thoughts that are inside your head? Chances are that it is. And chances are that deep in your subconscious, you're thinking about that person. Or you're still letting that person influence your actions today. And when people say, well, you just got to live with it, and the inner critical thoughts are good for you. They protect you, they keep you away from getting into bad situations or situations you can't handle. But, well, I don't know about you, but my inner critic thoughts have only ever kept me from growing and expanding and trying new things and getting out of my comfort zone and stretching myself. That's all my inner critical thoughts have ever done for me. So, if somebody will ask me, I will always say, no, you never just live with it. You never make peace with it, especially when you know that you can fight it, you can resist it, and you can change it. You can change the shape with it. And while it's a conscious process of overcoming the unconscious, because the unconscious mind is like versus the conscious mind, it's like David versus Goliath. But as we all know from that biblical story, David can overcome Goliath. But the unconscious mind is huge compared to your conscious mind. But it's also, if you can change it, if you can reshape it, if you can get it on side, if you can align it with who you want to be, and this is all possible. It's not within the scope of this live stream, but you can get it working for you. I mean, that is a huge ally to have on your side if you have it working for you, as opposed to having it constantly working against you, which is what everybody with shyness or social anxiety is struggling with. Their unconscious is working against them. It's received bad instructions, but the subconscious doesn't think for itself. It doesn't have the reasoning and process that the conscious mind has. It's received programming from your childhood, from that person in your childhood, and it's just accepted that, like brainwashing. It's accepted that it's being told that this is who we are, this is what we shouldn't be doing, this is what we're not capable of doing. And it's going to keep regurgitating that knowledge to you, to who you are, for the rest of your life, unless you do this intervention. So the first thing to do then is you can take Eckhart Tolle's model, imagining yourself in a room, a fly on the wall maybe, and the negative thoughts that come into your mind. Then you take a little mallet and bop the mouse on the head as it comes through the hole in the wall. A bit like Tom and Jerry, maybe. But this is your imagination, so you need to impose your own vision on this. So let me take a little bit of a different approach to this. First things first, because I know I'm not coming at this in a very structured way. I didn't plan out this live stream. But what I've been saying is that your inner voice is modeled on somebody else. And I want you to now give your inner voice form. I want you to imagine your inner voice as that person of authority that's been putting you down all this time. And give your inner voice, your inner critic, shape. Now imagine it in front of you. Just imagine it as a full-size figure standing right in front of you. Whoever it was in your childhood that was putting you down, which has negatively shaped your subconscious. Give your inner voice, your inner critic, form now. Imagine it as that person. Imagine them standing in your head, if you like, instead of right out in front of you. But imagine them standing there. Let's say they're in your mind. They're in this room that's in your mind, and they're standing there saying, "Well, so what? I'm only trying to help you." But give it form. And if you don't know who formed your subconscious in the first place, if you don't know the origins of all those negative thoughts that you constantly have that keep you from growing and expanding and being the person that you want to be in this life, then give it a form anyway. Give it the form of some type of monster, a gremlin, some nasty creature who has been putting you down all this time. Imagine it. Create some kind of monster in your imagination now. And this is your inner voice. And it's standing there now in your head, looking back at you defiantly, whether it's a person from your childhood or whether it's a monster that you've just created in your mind right now. And this is your inner critic standing there, looking back at you in its form. It's now got form. And the next step is, I want you to change the form of this creature, this person that's standing looking at you defiantly. I want you to change its form. I want you to morph it into something harmless. I mentioned Tom and Jerry. So maybe you can shrink down that person that you've visualized your inner critic as being and shrink them down to a harmless cartoon character. Or maybe Tinkerbell, something really benign and harmless and friendly. Or maybe a cartoon mouse. Whatever works best for you. I want you to shrink this monstrous inner critic voice down into this harmless little creature that couldn't harm a soul. And once you've done that, now think about the voice, the way it's always spoken to you, whether it's an authoritarian, loud, critical voice that puts you down in harsh tones, whether it's deep tones or shrill, high-pitched, screeching at your sort of voice. However, it's always spoken to you. And I want you to do the same thing that you did when you were visualizing it shrinking down into a little harmless creature. And I want you to shrink down the voice at the same time. So let's take a cartoon character, Mickey Mouse. I mean, if you ever heard Mickey Mouse, he's got this squeaky kind of voice. And you couldn't imagine it ever being authoritative, could you? Mickey Mouse's voice couldn't tell you what to do with any kind of authority. So imagine a character or a voice or a tone of voice that could never have authority over you, even if it used the words and it put you down and it ordered you not to do this, that, or the other. It told you that you couldn't do this, you were not capable of that, but it told you in this tiny, squeaky little voice. You're just going to laugh at it, right? And it's coming out of this little cartoon character that you've shrunk it down to. So now, instead of having a monster standing in front of you or some childhood authoritative figure commanding you with a booming voice or whatever, now your inner critic, you've just transformed it into this little cartoon character with a squeaky voice, and it's looking up at you from far below, and it's trying to order you in its squeaky little voice. And what you're going to do, you can't do anything much apart from laugh at it, right? Because it's trying to tell you what to do in this silly little squeaky voice, and it's just laughable, and it's just lost all its power over you. It's completely harmless now. It cannot have any influence or authority over you in its current form. Now, obviously, as you go about your day or your days, and you start experiencing critical inner thoughts, you're going to forget to do this. You're going to forget to reform your inner critic into a little harmless cartoon mouse with a squeaky voice. And it's going to come at you with this authoritative, booming voice, however it has traditionally come across to you. But this is what I was saying earlier. This is a marathon, not a sprint. It's not instant. So maybe you forget today, maybe you forget tomorrow. But if you're constantly thinking about it and reminding yourself, maybe you write it on the palm of your hand. If you use Mickey Mouse, for instance, I don't think Disney can sue you for this. But I think you can. I think we're safe to use Mickey Mouse in our imagination. So maybe write his name on the palm of your hand and remind yourself constantly to be an observer in your head whenever you've got a moment when you're walking down the street. Just pop into your own head, be a fly on the wall, and have a look for thoughts. Have a look and see if your inner critic is roaming around, and if it's chucking out negative thoughts at you, or if you just catch it off chance, if your brain is getting hijacked by negative thoughts, you're almost certainly going to forget to use this technique in the beginning. But if you keep thinking about it, keep consciously reminding yourself about it. Next time I have a bout of critical thoughts, I'm going to do this. I'm going to change the sound of that inner critic, and I'm going to imagine it as this harmless little Mickey Mouse creature. And then I'm going to laugh at it as it tries to tell me what to do, as it tries to tell me that I can't go into that shop and order a cup of coffee. I can't leave the house today. I can't put my hand up and answer a question in class. Whatever it is telling you that you can't do, this is when you need to consciously try and override that subconscious thought. And sooner or later, if you keep on persisting, you'll be able to do it more and more often until you've retrained your inner voice, or you've trained the negative thoughts out of yourself. Now, obviously, there's a lot more that can be done, but it's not. I mean, this is one topic for one live stream, and I'll go into other things that you can do in future live streams. So I think I'll leave it at that for this live stream. And yeah, what I'll do is I'll make this a part one of 2 parts. So, because I've got more thoughts about this. There's more you can do to expand this. So I'm going to do a part 2 on next Monday. So let's consider this as a part 1 of the inner critic rehabilitation. And next Monday we'll do part 2, and maybe if you're around, you can tune in. And I can see 3 people are watching right now. Great, thanks for that. So yeah, next Monday we're going to do part 2. So if you can, try and practice overcoming your inner critic and just imagining it as that harmless little Mickey Mouse creature in your mind, and just drain all the authority out of it, because you're the one that's in charge. It's your life. It's your mind. The retail space in your brain. It's time to evict them, I think. And I think you'll agree, right? Because we all need to grow. And if we don't do something about this, it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. It doesn't naturally fade away with time. I'm 48 now, and I can attest to that. I spent many, many years doing this, and it's worked. I can testify to that from personal experience. Of course, from time to time, I still get invaded with negative thoughts, but I can now immediately override them, and I can go a lot further. But in the beginning, as I say, it's a process of doing it a little bit at a time until you get there. And like I say, it's a long process, but it's well worth it. 18 months versus a lifetime. So this is your homework until next Monday. Try at least once or twice to consciously intervene on a bout of negative thoughts and transform the sound of those negative thoughts into that harmless little creature, and imagine it at the same time. Use the sound and vision together to reform that inner critic into something really harmless. And until next week, take care of yourself. Remember, self-isolation, it's not going to last forever. It's causing a lot of anxiety in the short term, but nothing lasts forever. Sooner or later, vaccines will be developed and life will get back to normal. So take care of yourself, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Thanks for listening.